We essentially have RFK in the building here. Dom Bei is here. Chris Alaimo is here, but Dom's voice, Josh, is shot.
Dude, he's not making fun
shot.
he's not making fun of RFK, by the way. Like, this is legitimately how Dom's voice sounds right now. Dom, take the floor for a second. Introduce everyone to the gravel pit that your throat is at the moment.
Yeah, I lost my voice. I'm not exactly sure how. I kind of have the CIA voice going right now, but I'm
Deep
here
throat.
though. I'm here.
He's here.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all that matters.
I was rolling around some joke ideas when you said that your voice was out today. And the most obvious one I'm going to have to just sling, which is you just had to deep throat so much in DC when you were there those 3 days that they took out your vocal cords and everything in Pelosi's office.
I don't even know what that means, but there was a lot of talking going on.
Yeah.
How was DC?
Talking.
You can keep these sentences short. How was DC?
DC was great. A lot of good conversation. I did have my voice. Just like solid education without really an agenda. And I think we had some real good convo about Bitcoin and policy and stuff like that. So it was really it was great to talk to the staffers.
Cool.
Nice.
Thanks for taking the torch into the hornet's nest. Seriously.
Yeah,
we need more of that, and bros like you are the guys to do it. Chris, how are you, man?
Doing well. My voice probably sounded like Dom's a day or two after the conference. Dom, I think you're just showing that the work gets done after the 9 to 5. It sounds like you're partying hard with the senators and congressmen and women. So I hope you're zapping them sats and stuff, and they understand lightning sort of and all that. But I'm doing well. I'm still in full upload mode for the conference on YouTube. I know Josh was commenting on that before we started, but things are going well. I'm finally recovered a week out.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, you were busy as hell, man. Like, every time we walked by that analyst desk, Chris was just shuttling people in, shuttling them away, looking for a random straggler that hadn't appeared, handing out photos of this whoever to go run after and find them. It was pure chaos, man. I don't know how you made it.
I won't insult the speakers, but it is like herding cats from time to time. I don't need to say names, but it is definitely like that when you're trying to get people on and off the desk and to where they need to go.
We got sent on an errand. Hey, Josh and Dan, go find so-and-so back in the whale area.
I don't think we didn't do anything, though. We just walked back there and had a beer, I think.
We walked back there, got a beer, pretended like we did something for you, Chris. Yep.
We tried.
Everyone made it, so you guys did something, maybe just the ether got them there in time.
Perfect.
Exactly. What are the high-level thoughts from you and the team on how the conference went overall?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I mean, I think ultimately the team is very happy with what we had. Obviously, I know very different than last year, than Bitcoin 2022. It seems a lot of the stragglers have deserted the conference this year, but obviously we're kind of building in the midst of all of the macroeconomics going on, and the Bitcoin price is reflected in that. But we're really building. A lot of our sponsors are happy. CK always makes this point. We only have one shot every year to do this. I know Bitcoin Amsterdam is kind of a conference that we added last year, but it's not to the magnitude that is, the Bitcoin conference that we host once a year. So a lot of the sponsors gave us suggestions last year, things they were not happy about, things they want to change, and we took it and implemented it. Ultimately, our team felt very favorable and happy with what it came out in the end product. And a lot of our sponsors, responded with that. There's always going to be the people online that bash us for one thing or another. And, what people don't realize is they only see, a few things up front, but there is thousands upon tens of thousands of decisions that go from the venue, from the food, from the speakers, to the panels, to, any one change affects everything in the building. So we are very happy with the ultimate end product. And we're very thrilled to put on this conference, and we're looking forward to going to Nashville in 2024.
Hell yeah. We're pumped to be there too. Yeah. Thinking through the Bitcoin Magazine, Bitcoin conference, and just what your team goes through, you are really stuck between two really hard sides. You've got feeble, destructive shitcoinery on one side in this space. And on the other, you've got dogmatic, binary, you could almost say quasi-religious Bitcoin maximalism on the other side, and you're not going to please everyone. Thought you folks did a pretty good job of basically focusing on advancing Bitcoin and Bitcoin adoption. Your team has said before, and Bailey said before, he's a Bitcoin maximizer, not necessarily a Bitcoin maximalist. And I do think that's the spirit of the conference, but it is a tall task. It is impossible not to get flack. And you folks have gotten a lot of it. And I'm here to say from the sideline, that's going to happen from here on out, no matter what the fuck you do with this conference. It's coming,
Yeah.
but I think most people loved it.
Even the larger it gets, the more people you draw in to have some kind of a problem, some direction or another. I think probably the most controversial thing you guys had going on was what I was lucky enough to be on the analyst desk for, which was the Ordinal debate. And having, run that back again, watched it afterwards, there's so much that I didn't glean out of that. Having sat on the desk, you're bullshitting half the time. You're not really fully engaged in the talk. And I'm actually, having watched it back, I really thought they did a good job of, Udi is ridiculous as usual, but they had some great points. They made some really surprisingly good points in my mind.
Yeah.
Should we start there? We're going to talk. We're going to zero in on 4 talks.
Could.
Let's order wise. Let's start with there since we're already on it. Josh already alluded to the fact we had a conversation in the Firehouse Kitchen the other day where he basically, did you watch it? And I'm like, yes, I did. And then what are your thoughts? And we did align in the sense that watching it back, I am less annoyed with it being included. I'm actually not annoyed at all. I think it's a net positive. I think that we just have to start embracing the fact that this is happening. This is not outside of Bitcoin, right? These Taproot wizards are on my node. And so to say that this shouldn't be included in the discussion is ridiculous because it's happening on Bitcoin. I'll throw it to you boys for any other thoughts, but that's sort of my initial take.
I think the thing that, I'll go ahead, Chris.
No, go, Josh, go ahead. Yeah, you got it.
I think honestly, I think the thing that turned a lot of people off was the one-upsmanship, the attacks on Shinobi sitting up there, a lot of one-line zingers to just kind of make fun of people and make fun of the project in general, which I think is the thing that turned people off. And you stop listening and actually taking their points into consideration when you immediately view them as somebody who's attacking you or your project or whatever you're working on. But after you can get past that, after you can get past the fact that they were wearing Gandalf costumes, dressed like wizards, making fun of, and once you really drill down to what they're saying, which is this is a free market. And if we're going to have a problem with what people are doing in a free market, then we're not the ones with the problem. You guys are the ones with the problem. Their delivery was, actually looking back on it, quite hilarious. I think they actually did a good job of making a splash by doing all the cartoonish stuff they did. But what I did take from that though is that Eric Wall seems to actually care about Bitcoin. And he's been in this for a long time. He's been in and out of the space. I think he's a lot more on the Ethereum side at this point, but I think he's actually genuinely concerned about the MEV, miner extracted value stuff that could potentially be coming up and how Bitcoin isn't prepared to deal with that. The way Ethereum for the last 5 years, their coders and developers have been neck deep in dealing with that for their nodes and their miners, whereas Bitcoin developers maybe not as attuned to that. And he actually has real concern that this could be a problem for Bitcoin, and he wants to make a splash and get people aware of it. So I do think that he was genuine, although a clown.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot to unpack there. Udi is Udi. I guess that's the best way to describe it. I think Eric, he had one of the best quotes of the conference, and I'll say it. I'll give everyone a fair warning. Some people watch with their kids, so there is a curse in this. He's like, Bitcoin is supposed to be safe against nation state attacks. If they aren't even safe against me and Udi fucking around, then what the fuck is the purpose of this entire conference or this entire project? And that was Eric Wall's quote. I think it's a good point. Matt Corallo had many great points, and it's kind of interesting. There's kind of 5, personnel or 5 lenses that you can look from it. There's Rizzo moderating it. There's Shinobi and Corallo taking against ordinals, and then Udi and Eric taking the pro ordinals. But I think one of the things that Corallo brought up that kind of ties into this is that there was this long discussion about, Bitcoin fees need to be down. It's still early in the project. Well, we're 14 years now into this project, and it's when is early? You're going from a boy to a teenager to a man eventually. If we're putting that as the saying of what Bitcoin's growing up.
We're seeing pubic hair right now.
Right? Yeah,
okay,
exactly.
It's emerging. Okay.
Yeah, and so I know Corallo and Shinobi were bringing up points that, BRC20 tokens are just a way to use up block space and they're wasting it. But Shinobi has also tweeted this before, talking about this whole ordinals thing. It doesn't scale. If these scammers or, people see them as scammers or as spam, the spam stops when they run out of Bitcoin. And when they have to buy more Bitcoin to do it, the price only goes up. And eventually they run out of Bitcoin or sats to do this attack. I know that there's questions, and like Udi and Eric bring up a point, like if this is meant for nation state attacks, if Udi and Eric doing this to begin with, like we're going to see even bigger attacks from the US, from China, from Russia, hopefully not the US. I know Dom's been down there doing the Lord's work down in DC in the swamp. But, you know, it is a very real possibility that they could seem to attack it or try and hinder the network that we're trying to grow on. So, yeah, that's just kind of my high level thinking. Anything that you guys want to take from that?
Another quote, just real quick, another quote Eric said, which really struck me, was that he said he got into Bitcoin originally years ago because he saw Bitcoin as the intellectual center of the world. And in his view, it is no longer that. And I think what he's pointing at is the dogmatism, all of the, the seed oil stuff, all the kind of the fringe stuff that you see, which is like half joking, half serious, but it's also like, why does that matter? Like we're working on this, free internet money protocol that is going to hopefully change the world. Like, I don't know. Yeah, I think that he's got something to say about where the intellectual center of this thing is at this point.
Yeah. I think that statement is partially true, partially not true, in the sense that I like that Rizzo challenged at one point. He stepped in and he challenged, and he basically said, you're wanting us to bring over features from an ecosystem that Bitcoiners want nothing to do with. If you look over at the land of shitcoinery, which he's claiming is learning all these things and developing all these tactics, which I'm not saying we should completely ignore, and I think that's the merit here, is there are things to learn. But Rizzo made a good point. And how much of that do we really want to draw forward? Because the average person that's interested in investing in this protocol is increasingly, especially in this bear market after everything that's happened the last couple of years, not interested in learning from shitcoins. On the flip side of that, though, the average macro nut, even us to a large extent, okay, we don't really know what's happening on the tech and protocol side. And I think this is some of what they're pointing at. You have all these macro economists and nation state players now and institutional investors and all this thing. And these folks don't have the slightest fucking clue what Taproot even is. And that's kind of some of his point, is that a lot of people are blind to the fact that there is still a development trajectory here. There always will be a development trajectory here. There always will be soft spots, and we need to start paying attention to that. The other thing I want to say, Chris, to piggyback on something you said, is that we need to ask ourselves, and I think this whole ordinals inscriptions debate begs the question, what is Bitcoin? It causes people to take a step back and realize that all Bitcoin is, when you really strip it down, is it's an immutable ledger, a distributed and decentralized database. Somebody could just think of it like a globally distributed Excel spreadsheet. And you can put more than just monetary things on there. You can now put dick pics on there, and there always will be those. But it is my base case that a radically decentralized, immutable supply, proof of work defended ledger is best suited for the application of money. And that's what you're saying there, Alaimo, that is what is going to emerge on the free market as the most useful on this database. And if it doesn't, the very thesis, what we're claiming about the brokenness of the global monetary system and the effectiveness of Bitcoin to repair monetary dysfunction, that falls apart if that's not the case. I don't know if that just landed for you guys, but that's sort of where I hang my hat on this, is that eventually this is built for the application of value transfer, and that is what is going to emerge over time on the free market of block space.
I think that, though, the point they were getting at, though, is that whether or not you like the BRC20 tokens, whether or not you like the ordinals, you don't have a choice. Like, it's within the consensus rules. It can happen. Therefore, you should be prepared for dealing with it, with this miner extracted value idea, like to have the ability to make sure that you can control how this plays out in a way, at least from the mining end of things. So it's like, it's not really an argument about if this should happen. It is happening. Like, we don't have a choice about that. So I think that was the fundamentally what he was trying to drill down to, which is we need to be prepared for how do we defend Bitcoin from this in the best way we can by making these they said they're improving the efficiency of BRC20 if they can, and then the miners on the other end can defend themselves. Or, and again, like, I could admit that I'm totally ignorant to exactly how miner extracted value works. I think we'd have to have someone on to talk about that more. But the point is that people need to be able to defend the network as well as they can. Well, I mean, if we're having this open network, it means anything that someone can put on within the consensus rules can and will happen.
Yeah. And kind of expanding on that, Dan, like I definitely am not, I'm technical, but not as technical as some of the developers. And I know NVK, we talked about on Bitcoin.review. He's like, I think there's less than 100 people that truly understand Taproot. And he's like, realistically, it's less than 10. And he's like, they're probably Bitcoin core maintainers like Greg Maxwell, Peter Wola, and like even people like that just have been in the project long enough. And then even Dom Bei
gets it. Yeah.
So maybe the 11th. There are 11 people out there. But to the point that MVK was trying to make is even they knew about the 3 upgrades that basically were bundled into the Taproot upgrade. They were kind of caught with their pants down too. They didn't think like ordinals or inscriptions were going to happen. And then, lo and behold, Casey Rodamore develops ordinal theory and inscriptions and kind of builds it and sends it out into the world. And then there's, a lot of action, or at least the transactions are filling up in the mempool. So I think it's kind of one of those things that, people don't know what they don't know. And it just kind of happened and was thrown into the ether. And there was more traction than they thought. I will say one thing to clarify. Like, I think it's definitely like buyer beware with like, obviously inscriptions. Like I don't own any inscriptions personally. You can do whatever you want with your money, but Shinobi made a great point that was, I think, missed by some people in the talk. He's like CryptoKitties, which was a project which I believe was 2016, 2017 and was on Ethereum, where people are like, oh, they like these cool kittens that have different like profiles or different ways that they looked. At one point, it was doing at least hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars a day. He's like, right now, it's doing less than $6,000 daily. So like, while like the Beanie Baby phase, whether it is the art collectors phase, like these have cycles. And if you're not catching it at the top, it kind of gets into this trading degen mentality of like, You're trying to push your thing of value, quote unquote, onto someone. And it's basically like the greater fool's theory, where with Bitcoin, you're buying into the network, and by holding it over the long term and using it for real monetary value and transferring. I think that's kind of the point that you're getting to, Dan. Like the monetary use is probably its best use case, but that does not negate other use cases, such immutable communications, such as putting things on the blockchain. So like all these other features that people can use, but that doesn't mean that that's the highest order or the most valuable thing to do. You can do it, but that doesn't mean that it's the most valuable.
Like Dom will for sure inscribe his hog on the chain at some point. There's no doubt in my mind.
Can you guys hear me? Is my voice coming across?
Yeah, we got you.
Yep.
Okay. I think this is a good example on why it's important not to generalize stuff. There's we don't like it when people generalize Bitcoin. Dude, it's impossible. The voice is...
Dude, when you texted us,
I didn't think it was going to be this bad, man.
Voice, I was like, oh, dude, you're good, bro. Like you're gonna be fine. Like no, you're shot, dude. Like you got nothing, bro.
It's like getting worse. Here it comes back a little bit. It's not good to generalize. Ordinals. There's aspects of them that are bad with people maybe getting scammed. And there's ways that it may interact with the network and have good use case. We always want to like categorize stuff into like that's trash or that's bad. We don't like it when it's done to us, and people go, "Oh, Bitcoin, like criminals use it," or like, no. There's so much to it. So I think it's good that you guys are taking apart the parts that are, we can agree on are bad, and then parts that are like, okay, like they have some good points here, or there may be some value. It's always complex. It's never like super simple.
Right. Yeah.
Good point. And the other, to piggyback on that, Dom, as Josh said too, they're here. This isn't like an idea that's been suggested that's not happening yet. Like they're here, and to undo them is not easy. It's not something we can just like snap our fingers and accomplish. Bitcoin's insanely hard to change, and this exists in the current instantiation of the protocol. And that's where I think some other people need to wake up, that think they'll just wave a wand and this is going to go away.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to say for people that aren't attuned to this topic at all is just that a full meme pool and higher fees, which we saw as a result of these ordinals and inscriptions, at least for a period of time, those fees have come down significantly, but fees were very high, some of the highest they've ever been to move Bitcoin. And in a sense, that is a helpful test of the network to push us to higher layers, right? And this is where I chuckle a little bit, because some people are saying that's a bad thing. And I sit there and I go, you said that you thought this was going to be a real player as a store of value in the economy, or even a global settlement layer, and you thought base layer fees were going to be cheap. If this thing is the trajectory is as bullish as we suggest, the base layer of Bitcoin is going to be very expensive. The vast majority of people, firefighters, will not be moving Bitcoin on the base layer in the future if this does anything remotely close to what I think it's going to do.
One of the most exciting companies and projects that Josh and myself, Dan, have come across in the last few years is CrowdHealth. If you're already familiar with CrowdHealth and have interest in checking it out, then use code BLUE for a significant 3-month trial discount. Healthcare is an incredibly confusing, stressful, and cumbersome space to navigate. CrowdHealth provides a remarkable and workable alternative to traditional healthcare setups for a fraction of typical premiums. It's essentially the decentralization of healthcare. You can leverage the power of Bitcoin alongside healthcare crowdfunding to put decisions about your health back in your hands. Each member gets access to great healthcare services as well as their own dedicated care advocate that will negotiate your bills and find members the best doctors and hospitals. Go to joincrowdhealth.com to learn more. And if you're interested in the Bitcoin-specific crowdfund, go to joincrowdhealth.com/Bitcoin. BCB listeners can enjoy healthcare freedom with code BLUE to get your first 3 months for a substantial discount at $99 a month. That is code BLUE. CrowdHealth is not health insurance, which we feel is a wonderful thing. If you have healthcare needs or concerns, seriously, give CrowdHealth a look. The Blue Collar Bitcoin podcast is brought to you by arguably the most legendary company in Bitcoin, CoinKite. They are the producers of the renowned Cold Card, the world's most trusted and secure Bitcoin signing device, built with a plethora of features fit for Bitcoin beginners all the way up to the most advanced of users. This device is a one-stop shop for your Bitcoin custody needs, and something the two of us have trusted for years. CoinKite also manufactures the Block Lock, a gorgeous e-ink digital display art piece sitting in the background of what seems to be every serious Bitcoiner on the planet. Block Lock can be programmed to scroll through key Bitcoin metrics including price, hash rate, next halving date, and much more. Boy, oh boy, will this thing look good in your living room or office. They are also the makers of many other security and fun products for all users, no matter their technical aptitude. Support our show and get a delicious discount on CoinKite products by following our affiliate link on the screen and in the notes, and using code BCB for 5% off the Cold Card.
Right. I saw David Bailey tweet today that he's seen, I don't know, a whole myriad of second layer technologies being worked on in Bitcoin right now. And I don't think that's just a happenstance. Like, we're seeing these fees rise. Like, that gives people the impetus to go work on things as second layers and tertiary layers to make this thing work more effortlessly. Like, Lightning has done a really good job so far, but it does have limitations. Like, we always need to be pushing the edges here and finding the newer things, which I think parlays really well into another talk we want to hit on a little bit here, which is the Ark announcement, which is it's an alternative to Lightning. I'm going to do my best here to summarize this quickly, but I'm not technical at all. I mean, I understand a lot of the basics of Bitcoin, but when you start getting on these tertiary layers, Lightning is already like a black box to me. And then this Ark thing is totally new, but it's basically an alternative to Lightning. It started the developer's name is Burak, I believe it is. Yeah, Burak. He started working on a Lightning wallet and decided he wanted to do a whole new implementation aside from Lightning that they're calling Ark at this point. He said that the biggest pain point for Lightning for most people, and I think Dan and I can attest to this after spinning up our own nodes, getting liquidity channels to balance. Opening a channel with another person, you need to find someone else that has a channel open so you can get into the wider network. But basically, the biggest pain point is managing the liquidity on your node. It's a pain in the ass. I never actually got one running solidly. I've got to kind of circle back and play with that some more. Just a million things come up, as they do. But so basically, this will make the custodial side of this much easier. It'll be easier to run one of these nodes. It is much less heavy on the base layer of Bitcoin. Lightning has to have a transaction to open and a transaction to close. I don't know exactly how this is going to work, but Burak says that the on-chain stuff is going to be much lighter. So it's going to have fewer touch points on the network, which allows Bitcoin to do its thing without being bogged down by tons of transactions having to happen in order for this to work. The other cool thing about this is it's very pro privacy. Every single transaction that happens is coin joined. So every time, I think he said like every 5 minutes, there's a coin join involving all of these funds. So basically your money is constantly getting mixed. It's very difficult to impossible to figure out where any of it originated. So privacy is a huge bonus. There are no liquidity constraints like there are in Lightning. And that basically means that you can only transact as much money as you have put onto your Lightning node. In this implementation, that's going to be more streamlined and it won't be a problem. Yeah, no payment link between the pair and receiver because of the coin join, which I think is a big benefit to this thing. And then there are going to be virtual UTXOs, which will be separate from the Bitcoin base layer. This will have a separate UTXO set altogether. Any other high level thoughts on this, guys?
I'm actually going to cue, I think we lump another talk in here too. So I found Ark really interesting as well. We actually didn't plan to talk about it at all, but I wrote some notes. One of my main highlights on my sheet here is no liquidity constraints. And
Huge.
that's going to parlay straight into splicing too. Before I hand it to you, Chris, because I want you to explain splicing and then we can kind of talk high level second layer if we want. But just the idea that, first of all, the second layers of Bitcoin are far from solidified. We're in the very first innings of figuring out how this protocol is going to scale, right? On the internet timeline with TCP/IPs fairly established, and we don't really know exactly what's coming next, what it's going to look like. But I think something to take away from that is it's a reminder of how simplicity at the center allows for innovation at the edge, which we talk about all the time on this show. Bitcoin's design is to maintain a boring, highly secure base layer, which then allows for experimentation and innovative protocols built on top of it. And that was one of my main thoughts after leaving this conference, is just how much ideating and iteration and innovation is happening on second layer solutions in Bitcoin. Chris, can you talk a little bit about splicing in addition to what Josh said about Ark? Splicing's more harnessing the existing Lightning network.
I think we should delineate because splicing is done on Lightning, so let's make sure we don't mix these two up and confuse people.
So Ark is a different second layer. It's not the Lightning network. It's a completely different second layer. That's what Josh just outlined. Splicing is a new tactic that can be used on the Lightning network. Chris, are you able to give a high-level overview of that?
Yeah, definitely. So, like reiterating your point, Ark is it's on side chains, or is it a state chain? I forget which one it was for Ark. Do you know, Josh, off the top of your head?
I don't.
I think
know
it's let's just say it's a side chain then. Where Lightning is obviously layer 2. You're kind of exactly that example, like locking up Bitcoin in liquidity. So, Josh, I'll use you as an example. Let's just say I open up a channel of 1 million sats on my side and 0 sats on your side. That means I can push 1 million sats to you, and you have difficulty pushing sats to me until there's balance on your side. Obviously, we can do interesting things where, Josh, you're going to pay me 500,000 sats on chain, and then I'm going to open up a channel of 500,000 sats on my side, 500,000 sats on your side. And like, we can push it back and forth payments as we see fit. Right. What splicing allows you to do is to rope in liquidity without changing or opening and closing channels. So using the same example of, let's just say there's 1 million sats on my side and 0 sats on Josh's side. But Josh is like, oh, Chris, I owe Chris 500,000 sats. Instead of like me trying to find a way to push sats to Josh, or Josh using some convoluted way of getting it in, he can do basically a splice, which is being the channel stays open, but you're basically doing a new on-chain transaction. You're adding liquidity. So in this example, I have 1 million on my side, 0 on Josh's side. Josh can do a splice, which is basically an on-chain payment that opens up into the channel. So instead of closing the 1 million sat channel and then opening a 2 million sat channel, he could add 1 million of liquidity on his side, paying the on-chain fee. So there's 1 million on my side. He splices in another 1 million. And so now it's a 2 million sat channel back and forth. In the past, if we wanted a 2 million sat channel and we only had 1 million between us, we had to close out the old one and open up the new one. And there's a bigger on-chain footprint of opening it, closing it, and then reopening it. Splicing allows you to add in extra liquidity or even take out liquidity. So we can do reverse splicing, which is where you take out, let's just say I need to pay Dan 200,000 sats, but there's 1 million in my liquidity and there's not a way to get to Dan for whatever reason. I could take out 200,000 sats. Now it's an 800K sat channel between Josh and myself, and we can use the liquidity in other ways. This is really helpful for liquidity providers. So instead of having dead liquidity, so in the event that I need to pay Josh, but a channel's not open, but we're using something like Voltage, if I need to go pay Josh, they need to open a channel or a connection between the two of us, and they need to leave Bitcoin in dead liquidity. Now with splicing, you can do it and you can enter it in without needing to have it there. So they can remove 200K sats from a different channel and put it into a channel between me and Josh without needing to close things or change things. So it's very, very cool. There's talks that this can open up Bitcoin to 500 million to 1 billion people. Obviously, we have not seen that in tests yet, but it's very cool. You can also use a splice into coin joining, so you can make it more private. You can take your toxic change and use it into a coin join and stuff. And what else did I want to hit on that? Yeah, so Dusty Damon is the one that is the developer that's been working on this for about 2.5 years. And I just see some really, really cool things where in the past, your liquidity channels were set. Now you can open up and change the bandwidth of how much the liquidity on the Lightning Network between two parties is.
Does that require on-chain transactions to work every single time?
As of right, yeah, to my understanding, it does. But with splicing, I'm pretty sure he's working on that. You can splice from Lightning channel to Lightning channel. So then that doesn't necessarily require another one.
Gotcha.
One last thing I wanted to add. It was something with the splicing and all of that. I'm drawing a blank on it.
I think I know what you're missing, and that's the implication of one balance wallets. So the main thing, first of all, this talk wowed me. I didn't hear this at the conference. It was on the open source stage, which, by the way, was a really cool stage. It's something you folks should continue to prioritize. And Dusty did a really good job of summarizing the takeaways for noobs like us that really don't know how this all functions. I'm going to reiterate some of what you said and start off with the one that hit me the hardest, which is basically this is going to integrate Lightning and on-chain Bitcoin. It's going to create a user experience with what he described as one balance wallets. The ability to do this and move channels in this fashion is going to create a seamless integration between both layers, which right now is not the case. You've got your Lightning wallets, you've got your on-chain wallets. That's a huge implication. That's a window into the future of Bitcoin where people aren't going to know necessarily the average user is not going to necessarily know on what layer they're using it. That's a potential profound implication of splicing. You hinted at privacy improvements. He talked about collaborative transactions, a coin join of sorts where different Lightning actions are combined together into one transaction. And then you did a marvelous job of unpacking the back-end liquidity improvements. I have set up Lightning channels on my Lightning node. It's been like a year and a half. I was immediately thinking, wow, this is not that easy. Not that it's really hard to set up the channels, but managing liquidity is very obviously complex. These mini banks, as he describes them, the Lightning routing providers, the people that make Lightning wallets function in the Lightning network lubricated, they're constantly opening and closing channels. They have to keep massive reserves, that dead liquidity, as you mentioned, Chris. And this splicing has the potential to remove both the need for expensive opening and closing of accounts, as well as the need for that idle reserve. This is a very significant Lightning improvement that irons out a lot of friction on that second layer as is. I'm really bullish on this from just the 2 hours of research.
I've got a question for anyone that wants to field it. So is the end goal of this to remove these on-chain transactions from having to happen many times or a majority of the time with splicing? Are you aware of that, Chris?
Yeah, it definitely helps with it. Like I said, you can splice from Lightning channel to Lightning channel, to my knowledge. The one thing that I wanted to add that I forgot, that's the most important thing that a lot of people I think looked over it, is so using the example of 1 million sats on my side and 0 on Josh's side, as the splice is occurring, obviously on-chain transactions, if we're doing an on-chain transaction to add liquidity, it does not disrupt the state of the channel. Meaning that as the splice is going in, so Josh wants to add 1 million of liquidity, but let's just say we're at a bar. I'm like, hey, dude, I'll front you the beers. I'll use Lightning. I can still use the 1 million of liquidity from me to Josh and then to a bar that Josh knows, without altering the state. So Dusty said that this is the thing that it actually hindered splicing the longest, or what's taking the longest, that the state change of the channel between us before it confirms with 6 transaction or 6 confirmations, we can still use the 1 million of Bitcoin liquidity or the 1 million sats of liquidity between us. And then as soon as it hits and there's 6 confirmations confirming this for an on-chain, it's all of a sudden a 2 million and it goes flawlessly. So you're basically kind of separating out the states of like, there's 1 million sats between us. And then as the additional 1 million or however much you're adding or subtracting, there's no hindrance. But he said that is kind of the technical difficulty, and that's the most difficult part, that it's never been done before. So it's kind of like you need to keep the state active while it's going in and adding liquidity or subtracting liquidity. Go ahead, Dom, you wanted to add something.
I was just going to say that the things that Dustin mentioned this is where the hidden value is for a lot of people that don't understand. Bitcoin is right here. That's why the splicing stuff is really important. On one hand, you have the sound money and the best designed monetary system ever in the world. On the other hand, you have people like Dustin building the infrastructure to carry that money from place to place in ways that like we've never even thought of in traditional or any kind of finance. And that's a hidden value that people who only look at Bitcoin as an asset are failing to see. They're not seeing that because they're looking at it like a stock.
Absolutely.
Instead of infrastructure.
And what that makes me think of is it's kind of like in the mid 18th or 1800s when they found oil in Pennsylvania and Texas, but nobody really knew what to do with this stuff. Like we've got this thing, we can lubricate some machines with it. We can, light lamps and we can use it to provide some light, but we can't really find any other useful thing for this black stuff that's coming out of the ground. What are we going to do with it? And then, that obviously leads to the internal combustion engine. We replace steam engines and petroleum runs the world, 150 years later. And we've found infinite uses for this stuff. We make plastics now. We've got, almost everything in your house is made out of petroleum in some way or another. So yeah, we're at the very beginning of this thing. This is like the Croesus, like Wild West stuff. We've found oil, but we're not really sure what we're going to do with it yet. And we're very early.
Yeah. And also, as you both marvelously articulated, it's just a window into the future of finance. And it seems so obvious to me. I mean, maybe I'm the clown, maybe we're the clowns, but it's so clear to me.
You're not wearing a wizard costume.
It's so clear to me that the financial rails of the future will run on open source protocols and algorithms rather than proprietary walled gardens. Like, and the beauty of it is people won't even know what's going on underneath the hood. I kind of hinted at this earlier. This is going to be so much easier as time goes on and these different features are built out on these different layers. Nobody knows how the electric grid works, yet they turn their lights on every single day. And so it's back to that theme of let's keep that base layer pristine. Let's keep that hard cap pristine. Let's keep this thing massively decentralized. And every single year we go back to this conference, guys, we're going to continue to be wowed on what somebody has thought up and is ready to share in this next epoch. It's crazy. It makes me so freaking bullish.
And I mean, look, Dan, of course they will, because no one hired Dustin. Dustin doesn't work for Bitcoin. He's a person that he said in the video, he's been working on splicing since 2011. And if the idea is good, it will work and people will adopt it. And if it's not, it will fade away into a forgotten memory. That's not how businesses or banks work. You hire people, you come work for us. We own the idea. So that's exactly why, like you're saying, Dan, the open source will win out for sure.
The closest analogy back to Croesus, I think this credit goes to him, is this is the maybe the best comparison we could give is you're just buying a piece of the internet early on, as the internet scaled in usage, the price of your piece went up. I mean, that might be the best analogy for what you're buying when you're stacking sats right now.
Yeah.
Should we pivot to RFK?
I was thinking that. Yeah, let's do it. Who wants
Dom
to?
Boy, you want to start us off, Dom?
You want to mount the horse here, Dom? Do the impression. Do the impression.
I can't because RFK, he's got an issue with his voice, and part of the reason I came on the show is because I'm like, hey, if that guy can go speak at the Bitcoin conference with no voice, I'm showing up to Blue Collar Bitcoin. Final answer. So,
Here.
So, I know we talked a lot about it after the conference. I know he had a really impressive speech. I know he talked about the pros, the cons, some of the challenges, the issues. Going back to what Alaimo was saying, I'm happy that Bitcoin Mag got him there. They executed. And so, yeah, I mean, like, I won't jump into my thoughts on all of it, but I mean, overall, first president candidate to kind of like take that kind of a stand, net positive.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I thought it was, from my perspective, listening back to it, I didn't get to listen to it live, but he cited the Canadian truckers as the inception inception point for when he started paying attention to Bitcoin, which is a huge deal. And some of the ideas that he, I mean, he's got some really crazy stuff rolling around in his head, which is right up the alley of, I think, the four of us sitting here, which is that one of the quotes he had, which was a government that has the power to starve people has the ability to turn everybody into serfs. He was slamming his fist on the Freedom Bible throughout that entire talk, and I think he struck a chord with the people there, and talking about how you should have a right to run a node, you should have a right to own Bitcoin, you have a right to your own fruits of your labor, which is what this country is literally built on. The Constitution is the epitome of those ideas, and he's not saying anything crazy. He's just saying we should be paying attention to the framers of the Constitution and the reason this country has been so successful over the past 250 years, and not try to put handcuffs on people. Let people be free to use whatever money they want. Let them be free to, have a peaceful protest. In Canada, he used the truckers as a jumping off point, but it was crazy to watch what went on up there. Those people were just basically had a problem, and they were just exercising their rights to say, we don't agree with this. And they got completely handcuffed financially, like to the point where they couldn't buy food for their families. And that's just not something that a free country should have going on. And I think he did a really good job of enumerating that and explaining his thoughts on it. And then Ross Ulbricht was another thing that I thought was really cool. Like, we had a long conversation about Ross later actually the next night. But whatever you think about what Ross did, he simply ran a website, an eBay type website for all kinds of, unseemly activity that a lot of people don't like. But again, like, it's not, I don't think it was wrong to just build a website and do what he did. I mean, we probably don't want to get into Ross too deeply here, but it would be really cool to see someone get Snowden back and free Ross.
Yeah, especially a life sentence. That's the absurdity.
It's multiple lives, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, double life.
Yeah.
I think one thing that's important, and there's a lot of people with politics, and we talked about it with the Ordinals. Politics on the ugly side has the tendency to compartmentalize people, label people, try to simplify the issue. I stand for freedom. They don't. I'm running against them. Or they stand for this. In reality, it's a very large system with people all over the spectrum. And so, that's just one of the things where I always get like a little bit, like cautious or worried, because Bitcoin is this thing that can embrace, all people, the spectrum. And, politics will divide people. And the only thing, if anything, with the RFK situation is, I just don't want to see Bitcoin become a divisive issue. I know RFK, excuse me, has some history, with the party he's running in with the Dems, and they have some some challenges and some issues over the years. DeSantis came and it kind of like, hey, you have a right to own Bitcoin. And he said, DC, they don't want you to do that. Well, DC is a big place of a lot of people working, including Republicans, independents, Democrats. And I know, there's party stuff, but I don't want to see Bitcoin become something that someone like maybe the Dems can't adopt, because they feel if they do, it'll be embracing the ideology of the Republicans. Yeah. When in reality, there's tons of applications that Bitcoin offers to any political party, any point of view, any implementation as far as things to do in the country.
Yeah. Yeah. Financial freedom, innovation, and inclusion should be fundamentally bipartisan. And I do think over time that will become obvious. Electricity is not partisan. The internal combustion engine's not partisan. The internet's not partisan. I think Bitcoin will eventually be lumped in that category as that foundational of a technology where it's not going to be partisan. But in the meantime, as we're in kind of the puberty stage, as we alluded to earlier, it may be partisan, and that could slow it down and create some discomforts that us Bitcoin holders and advancers don't really want to see. I did find the speech really inspirational. I listened to it there, and I don't think it fully hit me. And then I listened to it in my living room while drinking a vodka tonic after I came home, and I was really impacted by it. And I think what stood out to me the most was just the fact that he or his speechwriter really gets the authoritarian pitfalls that await us in the digital age. Couple quotes here. He said, technology has dangerously expanded the capacity of governments and corporations to control our lives. Distant, impersonal multinationals and authoritarian technologies have usurped the realms of human activity that were once private or held by community. End quote. Here's the next one. We live in a time where they monitor our every movement, our communications, our every transaction, and the technologies they use to monitor us can also be used to control us. So, Josh, you hinted at some of the things he said. It was a bit of a digital age Magna Carta, in my view. Guarantee the right to own Bitcoin, guarantee the right to run a Bitcoin node, guarantee the right to use electricity as you choose. Some very powerful themes. We know that he has no chance of winning the presidency, but having somebody in this position with that last name, as superficial as that may seem, saying this on stage could be a watershed moment. And I know a lot of people felt that way in Miami.
Dan and myself, Josh, talk a lot on this show about running a Bitcoin node. If you are a serious Bitcoiner and you want to verify, not trust, you will take this step at some point. For our node setups, we run software and hardware from Start9 Labs. This setup enables us to run a reliable and secure Bitcoin node, but then, if we so choose, experiment and graduate way beyond that towards many different areas of sovereign computing. You can download Embassy OS for free and install it on your own hardware, or you can buy one of Start9's plug-and-play devices. We highly recommend these devices. Start9 builds reliable and extremely easy-to-use products backed up with incredible customer support. Run a Bitcoin node, run a Lightning node, run a NOSTR relay. Take control of your photos, messages, passwords, pictures, and data, all on one device. Embassy OS operating system is the distribution platform open source software has been waiting for. Visit start9.com. We only recommend and endorse companies that we believe in, and Swan Bitcoin is a company we believe in. I have been personally using Swan to DCA into Bitcoin since May of 2020, when Bitcoin was the wee price of $9,500. Swan's interface and on-ramp is incredibly simple and user-friendly. With Swan, you can dollar cost average daily, weekly, or monthly, or conduct a smash instant buy whenever you want. Withdrawals to cold storage are completely free and can be totally automated, truly set and forget. Swan wants you to hold your Bitcoin keys, and support is one click or phone call away if you need help during this process. Buying Bitcoin is just the tip of the iceberg. Swan also has a Bitcoin IRA product, business and nonprofit offerings, resources for financial advisors, private services for high net worth clients, and phenomenal educational materials. Visit swan.com for more information. And at swan.com/fire, you can learn about and receive Swan Premium for 1 year.
Yeah. I guess I'll comment from my perspective being at Bitcoin Magazine. We knew coming into the event that like we were going to have potentially a bunch of presidential candidates speaking about Bitcoin. The cool thing about RFK, even more than Tulsi and Vivek, and nothing against them, they had good speeches as well, but this was his first stop on his campaign. So he announced he was being a presidential candidate. Vivek's gone to some smaller events. I think this might have been Vivek's actually biggest event since announcing his candidacy, but this was RFK Jr.'s first stop in his presidential campaign. We're truly honored to take on that. And the thing that was difficult with us having presidential speakers, we didn't want it to be, to your point, to be a bipartisan issue. We wanted it to be a partisan issue, meaning that we had RFK Jr., who's a Democrat, Vivek, who is a Republican, and then Tulsi Gabbard, who has, fell away from the Democratic Party. A lot of people think she's going to declare Republican, but as of right now, she's technically an independent. So we tried to have the voices of all three to demonstrate to the world that, Bitcoin is for everyone. It's for any political class. I know from the DNC's Twitter handle, they basically had a poll showing, if Biden runs or if Biden doesn't run, and RFK wasn't on either list, which I thought was very ironic. And they're trying to lump him in with saying he's a far alt-right extremist. I see what people write online. But I guess the big takeaway of it all, and I even fall into more of the Bitcoiner camp, that like don't trust a Bitcoiner, don't trust a candidate what they say, trust in what they do. I know Q mentioned this on the news desk. He's like, we've been bamboozled by politicians in the past. Eric Adams, hate to jab at someone that was so thankful for the city, but like Mayor Suarez, like, hey, like I'm all for Bitcoin, then Miami coin. Or Eric Adams, like, yeah, I love Bitcoin. I'm taking my salary, then half in Bitcoin, half in this shit coin. Oh, I actually hate Bitcoin. I'm going to make it more difficult for people in my city to use Bitcoin or mine Bitcoin. So, I think Q has a great point. Don't take them at their word. Take them at what they do. I guess the last point that I will hit on here is that this was not done for the hardcore Bitcoin maxis. I got a lot of DMs from a lot of my friends who have a lot of respect. And they're like, I'm so mad. I'm not political. I don't vote. I vote for my money. I'm like, dude, I agree. I completely agree. This was not for you. And they get all mad. They're like, it's the Bitcoin conference. It's for me. It's like, no, we are trying to open up with a Kennedy speaking at a Bitcoin conference. I know you don't care, but your 68-year-old dad or uncle cares. Your 83-year-old grandmother who knows where she was when RFK Jr.'s uncle was assassinated. Like, oh, wow, that guy's speaking at the conference. I remember where I was when, JFK was assassinated. So it's like,
my mom, it's the first thing she said when I got back from the conference. My mom's 70. And so this could be a touch point for her. I'm not saying it is, but just to substantiate your point there. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that, Dan. So a lot of people were mad that we did this, but we did this to open up the masses to Bitcoin. And to your point, this may be a first touch point for everyone, for people ever hearing about Bitcoin. So, obviously we talk a lot of times about multiple touch points. Normally it takes people 3 touch points before they finally get it. But if this is their first one that they heard at Bitcoin 2023, we're honored to take on that burden. And, hopefully we'll get them to the point of like, hey, voting's maybe a waste. Maybe I should vote my dollars. And that's the more important vote at the end of the day. But this was not meant for the hardcore Bitcoiners. This was meant for the people that have never heard about Bitcoin, or the people that are political, that are like, oh, maybe this Bitcoin thing isn't as bad because there's Republicans, Democrats, and independents talking about it. Like, and there wasn't a fight on stage. It was very civil, the discourse that was going on. So that was just my 2 sats and why we decided to do this. And obviously, Bitcoin 2024 is going to be in July. Primaries for both the Republican and Democratic Party happen in August. So hopefully, it'd be cool if we hosted a presidential debate before any of the mainstream media. That's a goal of ours, or, maybe a goal of mine, but we'll see if that is allowed to happen or if it does happen. But yeah, hopefully that'll be another touch point for people down the line for sure.
Yeah, I think that cynicism that you mentioned, where people are like, don't listen to what they say, watch what they do. I mean, I share that myself. And I think anyone who's been around long enough to watch, like, I don't know, it takes like maybe 3 presidential cycles before you watch what they say, you watch what they do, and you go, yeah, they're probably all full of shit. You just have that cynicism about you. One other thing he said I wanted to highlight is, he did a lot of bashing on the pandemic and the response from the government towards it. And he said the Constitution was not written for easy times. It was written for hard times. And that's kind of when we see how much these rules of the road that we've laid for ourselves actually matter and actually affect, which sadly, it seems as though we just kind of throw it all out the window when shit hits the fan and we just do whatever we want. But again, that's like back to the cynicism that I think a lot of people in this space feel, and a lot of people in general feel, because I think, what is Congress approval rate at like 8% right now? Like, that's not a population that trusts anything these clowns have to say. So yeah.
I was just going to say, I think this is all good. And I know like the Bitcoin community will work. We just have to make sure we pay attention and work towards combating the use of, and I'm not saying RFK did this. We haven't seen this yet that I've seen, but we should resist or counter Bitcoin used as a political weapon, as a battering ram. And I know the Bitcoin community will, because like they, overall, we care about Bitcoin and what it represents. Just something for us to watch as this. And to Chris's credit, like Bitcoin Mag, politicians are going to get into Bitcoin, whether Bitcoin Mag has someone or not. Right. So they could have been like, oh, we're not going to have this person here. You think that means that they're not going to address the Bitcoin audience on their own? They will. So for people who are upset about it, like, I think it was a good move by you guys. It had a lot of value. And again, even if you wouldn't have done it, it will not keep politicians out of Bitcoin.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that most people have took away from this is that in order for a candidate for presidency to want to even be at a Bitcoin conference or want to even mention Bitcoin means that this thing has gained enough momentum, enough traction that politicians are having to sit up and take notice. And that's a big freaking deal, in my opinion. whether or not they're genuine, whether or not, you believe them or what they have to say or what they're going to actually do. The fact that they're showing up and making speeches at a conference like this is a big deal.
Yeah. I think also the obvious statement I have is just that I'm not enamored with our political system, but to suggest that the political sphere doesn't matter is really naive. Like that's something that would be said by a basement dwelling warrior who's kind of divorced from reality. A lot of how our lives work, how our assets grow, who knocks on our front door happens through regulation in the political sphere, whether you like it or not. So I do tip my hat to people like you, Dom, that are fighting that fight. The Bitcoin Policy Institute. I was on the panel with Matt Pines in Miami, the Satoshi Action Fund, and the list could go on of the people that are trying to educate policymakers on the significance of this technology. And I think to suggest that this will just work its way out and it'll be totally fine, even if they all hate it, maybe on 100-year timeline, but I'm not going to live for another 100 years. And I have 2 kids and a wife that I want to live in prosperity and reap the benefits of stacking sats. So this stuff does matter.
And remember, when I was doing work with the Bitcoin Today Coalition and Amanda, but the staffers that work for Congress folks and Senate, like they're everyday people. They don't hold these like insane authoritarian positions. Like staffers, they work. That's their job. And so educating the office, people have to remember it's not just a senator or a congressman or woman. It's an office with a whole team of people. And if you can educate them, it's worth it, even if you're kind of frustrated with the system and, you're feeling like, all right, like it's rigged. Because that's kind of how you'll still make progress, even if the system, we have to circumvent it in certain ways.
Yeah, well said. Should we hit the AI chat?
Yeah, let's spend a few minutes on that. This one I was especially attuned to because I've just had this whole rabbit hole of AI stuff I've been down in the last few months or so. And we spoke to John Stokes on our podcast a couple of weeks ago, which was cool. I think so. A couple of things I took from this. I was really negative on AI after listening to, they even mentioned Eliezer Yudkowsky during this talk. He's very pessimistic about how this goes. He thinks once AGI is developed, it's going to basically be it's just going to develop itself so quickly that it'll be unaligned, which means that it'll have no care for us whatsoever. So just because it doesn't care could accidentally kill us, all of us, Skynet situation in some quasi weird future, right? No big deal, but I mean, just a slight concern for this AI research stuff. So they addressed that and they said, I think the gist of what they were saying about that is that, and I think I agree with this, and tell me if you think this is true as well, Dan. Once you start understanding this stuff, I mean, I'm not saying that I know better than Eliezer Yudkowsky, who's been researching this for 20 something years, but having some understanding of how a technology works takes a lot of the fear away.
Yeah.
Even just a base level, like surface level understanding. Once you see it's not magic, it takes that fear away that you naturally have as a human being, that there's going to be a tiger in the tall grass that's going to murder you and your family. So that's number one to take away from this, is that you should understand what this is, because it does dispel a lot of the fears once you do. But I think,
and wait, Josh, to chime in real quick to just affirm what you said, it's that one of my takeaways, having listened to Yudkowsky and having Stokes on and kind of doing a deep dive to have an episode with it, and we talked about this a lot, is just that fear is the most powerful emotion. So I'm not saying that Yudkowsky is trying to leverage that to manipulate. I'm just saying, of all the perspectives on the AI spectrum, his is going to be the most obviously magnetic, and it's going to blow up the most, because he literally says things like, we're all going to die within the next 10, 15 years. Like when someone says shit like that and they're a lifelong expert in this technology, which he is, it's going to get a lot of views and a lot of clicks and a lot of interest, but he's just one tiny pinprick on the spectrum of AI. And so as we unpacked it more and have seen more optimistic perspectives, which came through on this panel, I have softened a bit. I think we need to give credence to his pessimism,
I think so,
but also not get completely raptured by it.
No, I mean, there is reason to have some fear about this. This is a very, very black box that nobody truly understands how it works fundamentally. But aside, I think the thing from this talk that was really impactful for me is obviously they intertwined how Bitcoin and AI are going to coexist in the near future, obviously. And what is it? Let me just check this guy's name really quick because I want to give him some credit. Is it Drew Bensal?
Drew Bensal, yeah.
Drew Bensal. Okay, so he was saying basically that life ecologically has to metabolize. That's what it is, right? It requires ATP. That's the energy source in our cells. That's how we actually have. That's how we're anti-entropic as life forms. Like we are some of the only things in the universe that actually improve instead of degrade over a period of time, and that's because we're using energy and lots of it. So in his view, Bitcoin is the energy that AI is going to need to acquire in order to metabolize itself. It's going to need to pay for its own resources. It's going to need it requires massive data centers to run, and it requires energy. It requires all the things we all need. And once it understands money, and once money, and I think we all agree in the next 10 to 20 years, this is going to be the currency of the internet. It already is, but fundamentally that's what it is. And so AI is going to have to use it and then acquire it, and therefore be another buyer on the long list of people that are going to have to own Bitcoin to exist. And this is literally potentially ATP for artificial intelligence is what we're looking at here. And it just kind of blows your mind to think that, like, not only is this bullish for Bitcoin, but it's massively bullish. There could be any number of these AIs existing out there that have to acquire this in order to run. Their life requires it. And that really was a striking thing to really think about.
So bullish it may make CK Snarks blush, dude.
Maybe.
I mean, it.
Well, I'll tell you, if the fear is that AI is going to take us over, you think they're going to use the dollar if they get smart enough to?
Fuck no.
Fuck no.
They're going to see straight through that charade.
They take over humans and they outsmart the humans, but they're still using a dollar that's like, by that time, 150 trillion, 400 trillion debt. And they go, yeah, we'll use this. Like, no, that's the first thing they're going to get rid of.
The first thing they're going to do is be like, how are we going to prop up this bond market? Hold on. It's going to take super intelligence to figure this fucking out from here on out, because this thing is a complete disaster.
It's just math, gentlemen. The computer already knows. They just have to print more money, and then when they realize the currency breaks, then they go to Bitcoin. Go ahead, Dan. You were going to say something?
No, you fire away.
I think I was like everyone. I kind of had a fear of AI at first, and I think this is just something that with technology, like people were afraid of like Elvis shaking his hips. They're afraid of the internet coming into. They're like, oh, what's the @ symbol? Oh, this email. They were afraid of Facebook, and they're afraid of Google. But at the end of the day, a lot of people use these things. It helps prosperity. It expands civilizations. Yes, there's pros and cons to all of these different things, but I think this is just another thing on the long list of things that there'll be something post AI, that like someone else is worried about. I mean, we have nukes, for God's sake, and we've managed, knock on wood, to not blow ourselves up and, wipe human.
Isn't that profound? Race. That we've been able to go 70 something years without blowing each other up with nuclear weapons. That is encouraging, really.
Yeah,
exactly. One of the most bullish things I can think of.
Yeah,
that we went through an entire Cold War, had these weapons that could destroy the entire world, and we've somehow managed to keep ourselves from being complete knuckle-dragging apes and just pushing the button.
Yeah.
Bullish.
And yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of fear with the new technologies, but I think as like what you guys mentioned, like as long as you have a base understanding of it, or if you start to use it, you realize that this is nothing to be feared about. This is just something to prop up humanity, to improve humanity. Maybe one of the best developers of Bitcoin, that second or third layer, maybe an AI bot that helps, Dusty like plugs in splicing. It's like, something I overlooked. It helped me like realize the new code to fix this. So I don't know where this is going to go. I would be a liar if I said that, I didn't have fears at first. But I do think that this is something that will prop up humanity, and it's a tool. As much as a hammer and a gun can be used for good, they can be used for bad. It's the same thing with AI. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, Josh, I love the ATP thing. It really stood out to me. He's basically begging the question: what is going to be the ecology of digital life? What is it going to run on? What is that future going to look like? And he parlayed that into asking, in a multipolar future, which we often think is just a bunch of different nation states and maybe multiple reserve currencies, but we also have to envision a future with a bunch of different, very powerful AIs or super intelligences. What settlement layer is going to work? What form of value transfer is going to work in that environment? It's going to need to be immensely robust. It's going to need to be global. It's going to be neutral. And it's assuredly going to be running
You guys lose them too.
in digital form on the internet. We'll fill in the blanks of that. It starts with a B and it's an orange coin. So it's like, at least of the options we have right now. So it's an obvious blinking orange light that this could really fill the gap for that multipolar digital future. And that seems extremely bullish, as we've established several times so far. Dom.
It also has a lot of potential for allowing people who really understand Bitcoin, but maybe don't have a coding background to build on the network.
Yes.
And I think we're going to see that play out in certain ways that will accelerate a lot of the stuff Chris was talking about with layer 2, where it's at, and further build outs for sure.
Yeah, I've used that myself to just code in Python, something I thought would be cool to try out. And it's amazing how good GPT-4 is at just like, hey, write me something in Python that'll transfer my videos from this hard drive to the other one in chronological order based on the metadata. And it's a simple thing to write probably if you know what you're doing, but I don't know how to code anything. And it worked completely seamlessly. It's amazing. I mean, it's literally your creativity is the only limiting factor when it comes to this stuff. Every single day, there's something new. I don't know if you guys have seen the new Photoshop tools. It's insane. You can take a picture, you can say, I want to adjust it in this way, and then it just seamlessly does it. There's so many applications for this. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah. And I know that they may be threatening to some people, but if we're to just share our own situation, it's magnificent for a couple firefighters who are podcasting. Our business, the reason we've scaled anything is because people enjoy conversation. A lot of that side stuff takes a lot of work. In the past, a lot of media there's been a lot of red tape. There's been a lot of friction. The cost of entry has been very high. And now two blokes like us can get a decent sounding looking product and leverage AI tools and compete in that marketplace. And that's true for a lot of people in a lot of different spaces. It does unlock a lot of entrepreneurial opportunity for, say, middle and lower class folks that would not have had it before.
You can also use it to score big points with your wife. Because look, I can't read this, but I sent this to the wife. This is me. Can you read that, Dan?
Why do I miss my wife so much?
Is it sexting right now?
No.
Dude, you're sexting with ChatGPT.
That's ChatGPT 5.
You're years ahead of us, man.
Did you read that?
It's too small. I've gotten too old to be able to. Actually, I have LASIK. I should be able to read that. Fresh LASIK, Josh, and I still can't make that out. It's kind of pathetic.
Dude, get your money back.
Yeah.
LASIK's a shit coin.
You can ask a lot of questions, and you can use it to show your wife. Like I was checking out, love questions with ChatGPT.
Brilliant. Yeah, get your spouse buttered up on shift, right? Just get auto GPT. Hey, sex the wife.
Yeah.
Don't be overbearing. Be realistic with my tone.
Right,
and
warm her
let's
up.
Get this
Make sure
thing ready
she's
for when I
purring
get
by the
back.
time I get home.
At 9 a.m., shit's gonna get crazy. Often does in this household. TMI maybe. Any other comments here? Yeah. Any other comments on AI? Any of the chats or just the conference in general, gentlemen? It's open session now.
Well, working on some really cool stuff. Should have more to follow, but I think some real pivotal moments coming up in the efforts with the unions and Bitcoin. Stand by to be continued.
We're looking forward to finding out more about that.
Just a teaser.
Hey, real talk.
Dude,
I want to throw in here.
He just hiked his skirt up just a little bit. We almost saw Bush.
Yeah.
Not quite.
Didn't catch a glimpse. Real talk. I want to say one of my highlights of the week was seeing both of you in person. We've interacted digitally, but it was great to spend time with both of you guys. Chris, you absolutely killed it on that desk, man. It was fun to watch you in action. A well-researched individual that can also articulate, go straight Scott Van Pelt on the desk. You did a great job. And Dom, you have to be, and this is what, Josh, we have a combined approaching 20 years of service. I think we agree he's in contention for one of the funniest firemen we've ever met in our entire life. In contention. I'm not going to give it to you yet.
Dude, the Uber ride, really quick, before we end this, and we got to tell them the Uber ride story. We're at the Swan party thing. We're going to some Cuban restaurant in South Beach. Dom tries to sell the Uber driver on downloading a Lightning wallet for like 20 minutes straight, just cracking us up. Like, he's every angle you could imagine. He's like, dude, I'm going to give you a huge tip. If you just put this wallet on your phone, that's all you got to do. I'm going to give you a giant tip. Otherwise, you're just getting a fiat tip. And the guy didn't break, but Dom had him rolling. Like, this guy's laughing his ass off. He's talking about trading shit coins and stocks or whatever he was doing. But the guy Dom killed it. He almost sold him. You
stiffed him, right, Dom? Because he rejected Bitcoin, you gave him the donut, right?
I did a complaint on Uber, and I said that he punched me in the head.
Yeah, he tried to he was hitting on us and was a real weirdo.
Oh man, I'm always trying to orange pill like a couple people a day now, and I found just being lighthearted, like joking around, is the best way, because it disarms them, and it just goes hey. Let's not put so much weight on this. Check this thing out. So, for sure.
Hey, we're going to run it back. The three of us, I think we need to start a new branch at Swan Fire EMS, dude. Close us out, Alaimo, here.
I thank you for your kind words, guys. I appreciated being on the news desk. And, I worked very hard to do that. I was talking in front of my mirror for months on end. My fiance thought I was freaking insane, but I think the hard work paid off. One of my highlights was hanging out with you three gentlemen as well. I think the last night, that was Saturday night.
That was fun.
I wish you guys had a later flight like me. That's, learning for next year, that we can hang out and let the night not end.
Then we could have stayed up till 4:00 in the morning instead of only 2:30.
You act like that
right?
night ended early. I got to bed at 2:40 or 3 a.m.
Dude, that was
a
rough
we're gonna roll it back. We're gonna roll it back, and we're just gonna let the sun come up, and then we'll be going to bed next year. But no, thank you so much for your kind words. I hope you guys, all three of you, had a blast at Bitcoin 2023. I hope you guys come back to Bitcoin 2024 to roll it back. We're playing on home court now, so if you thought Bitcoin 2023 was good, there's going to be a lot of cool things like Bitcoin Park. Bitcoin Mag's headquarters is there, so I'm sure there'll be a lot of awesome side events there. And we're in Nashville, where Bitcoin Mag was founded, so we're really looking forward to bringing it back, bringing it to the city of Nashville. And I want to give a thank you to the city of Miami for having us for 3 years when no one else would. So that's pretty much it. Thanks, guys.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, dude, Miami gets weird at 2:00 in the morning. I can tell you that.
Yes, it does.
Careful out there.
We'll be back in 2024. We're already pumped. See you boys
guys.
there. Have a good night,
Thanks,
gentlemen.
guys. Have a good one. Peace.